French citizens have been taking to the streets in large numbers for days now. By any measure, these demonstrations were significant. Protests against the French government were held in the millions across hundreds of cities. The decision by French President Emmanuel Macron to increase the retirement age minimum from 62 to 64 was a major factor. Many French citizens were understandably dissatisfied with this choice.
Tonight, fires across France. One protester telling us this is a war. Hundreds of thousands taking to the streets, outraged over French President Emmanuel Macron's unyielding determination to reform pensions here.
The government of Macron is just destroying everything in our society.
Police clashing with protesters. This the 10th day of nationwide demonstrations since January. Some setting light to garbage, throwing projectiles, and smashing windows. In Paris, strikers shutting down popular tourist attractions, from the Louvre to the Eiffel Tower. Railway workers yielding flares, blocking the tracks at Paris's Gare de Lyon train station. French authorities responding with what they're calling an unprecedented show of force. 13,000 police officers deployed across the nation. The chaos stretching far beyond the capital. Police are fighting running battles with protesters in the streets. Things are being thrown. This is some guy here just been arrested. In Nantes, protesters scuffling with riot police, engulfed in clouds of tear gas. Massive crowds stretching across highways in Rennes. The historic unrest sparked by President Macron's plan to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64, ramming the measures through his country's legislature without a vote. His party says the country will rack up a deficit of more than $10 billion every year through 2032 if nothing is done.
Welcome to the Financial Fortune channel, where we bring you the latest updates and insights on the world of finance and investing. Our aim is to empower our viewers with the knowledge and tools they need to make informed decisions about their financial future.
Mark, this issue about reforming retirement in France, it's been a rocky, thorny, difficult subject for many governments, hasn't it? And it has already been so for Emmanuel Macron.
Absolutely. He tried a different kind of reform during his first mandate. There was a huge social movement on the streets. It was really, he had struggles in parliament, then COVID hit and it never went further. This time he's going with a simpler reform, but more explosive one, especially for the unions. They've said, including so-called reformist unions, that raising the legal age of retirement is a red flag for them, and that they will immediately call for strikes, demonstrations, and so on. And so this is why the Prime Minister just said, our initial idea, the President's initial idea, was to push the retirement age to 65 after dialogue, thorough discussions with the unions, with other political parties. We've decided that it would only be 64 by 2030. It means that essentially, as of next September, if this goes through Parliament and is implemented, the retirement age would be raised by a quarter during the next 8 years. So she really took time to say this is a balanced project. This is about justice. This is about raising also the level of the pensions, especially the small pensions. This is not a way to tear apart this cherished cradle to the grave welfare system for the pensions that we have here in France, because she knows that there is opposition in Parliament. As I mentioned, there's likely opposition mobilization on the streets, and the polls tell us and tell her that the majority of the French are against this. So she announced that it would be gradual, but she also said nothing is set in stone, nothing is final. We're open to dialogue, we're open to discussion. However, clearly by saying that the legal age would be raised to 64 and not to 65, and also by saying that the raise in small pensions to 1,200 euros would apply not only to future retirees, but a chunk of those already retired, she's meeting the demands of the key group in parliament, the conservative group. This is their two main demands, 64, and that the raise in minimum pension will also be applied to those already retired and not only to future ones. And basically, they say, okay, if this is the project, if this is the bill, we'll vote for it. And the government only has a relative majority. They need the 60, 62 votes in parliament. The big question is whether this will be enough, because in France, yes, you can vote bills in parliament, but especially on those social reform issues, the answer is not only in parliament, but it's on the streets.
The Prime Minister said it's balanced. It looks like the government is looking to actually sort of keep everybody involved in this, but that thorny issue of raising the retirement age might be the thing that pushes the 8 main unions across France to actually call some action and create the kind of characteristics of demonstration on the streets that people used to seeing.
Right, because as a union leader was pointing out, he said after meeting the Prime Minister last week, he said, you've done something really great. The unions are united like they haven't been for a decade. But the problem for you is that they're united against your project. And so this is, yes, it's true. Generally, there are some unions who say, yes, we might tinker with the reform system and so on. They want a kind of Scandinavian-like model. It's a bit technical, which is what Emmanuel Macron had in mind. But just raising the retirement age, asking people to work longer, for them, it's a red flag. The government says, it's for justice, and it's also because there is a deficit, and it's only going to grow because the demographics show that there are less people working and more people retiring because they live longer, etc., etc. I'm not going to lay out all the argument because it's so well known, but the unions are saying no. It's not true. The deficit is only small given the hundreds of billions of dollars spent each year by the state to pay for pensions. So not everyone agrees. The government is hoping that it can push this through Parliament, that because of COVID fatigue, of war fatigue, of inflation worries and so on, the unions will not be able to mobilize en masse in the street. But no one knows. No one knows, and it's also a probability that the government is also keeping some bullets dry because they might make some further concessions. In Parliament, it seems they have a deal with the Conservative Party, but maybe if things turn sour on the streets and they see that there are mass demonstrations, but especially strikes, especially in the transport system, they might need to concede more. It's always a very difficult, controversial issue, and this should not be different.
This retirement program plays an important role in France's massive social security system. The government spends approximately 15% of France's total GDP on it. Unfortunately, social security is unsustainable, despite the fact that it provides free healthcare and state pensions for everyone. The French government has long operated with a budget deficit. It spends more than it receives in tax revenue. France's debt as a proportion of GDP has been on the rise for many years. This indicates that France's government debt is growing faster than the country's overall economy. Eventually, your debt will reach unmanageable levels, so the French government is examining preventative measures. This can be accomplished by reducing spending. One of the places to do this is the social security system, where the government spends 15% of the country's GDP. This is an enormous expense that the government cannot afford. At least when considering the debt figures, a 2-year increase in the minimum pension age is beneficial. The president hopes to resolve this issue. However, let's examine the underlying issue here. Why can't the French economy afford its social security system to begin with? After all, the system was never intended to result in a budget deficit for France. It was assumed that working taxpayers would always be able to pay for retirees, but this is no longer the case. Evidently, France does not have sufficient tax revenue to fund its social security program. The only solution to the French social security system's demographic problems is to raise the retirement age. You will have more workers and fewer retirees, resolving the issue in the short term. But obviously this isn't too popular in France, as we've seen in the last few weeks. Millions of people went onto the streets to protest this decision. Protesters clashed with police and started fires in the streets. So France's demographic problem is causing a lot of civil unrest. But what if I told you that France is not the only country in Europe? All of these other European nations, including Germany, the United Kingdom, Italy, and Spain, face the same kinds of challenges. This has one reason: Europe is aging very fast. Just like it did in France. This will result in significant problems. One of the most important things to discuss is the fertility rate. With fewer people being born each year, the population is aging. Numerous crucial systems may collapse as a result. Consider the situation in France as an example. There are too many elderly and not enough working individuals to sustain the pension system. Across Europe, a similar demographic imbalance exists. This relates to the old age dependency ratio, which is the proportion of people older than 65 to those younger than 65. In Europe, older people work less than younger people. Most people retire at the age of 64. Retirees no longer contribute to the economy, but they require substantial financial and social support. The elderly in France receive pensions and must utilize the healthcare system. We have observed that the pension system fails without young people to support it. For the French government to pay pensions to retirees, it must collect taxes. To collect these taxes, you need individuals under the age of 65 who are advancing the economy through the healthcare system. It is identical to have a functional healthcare system. You need doctors and nurses. Most of the time, these individuals are under 65 years old. For every retiree, soon to be 2, there are only 3 people to provide the financial support for every retiree, which is asking a lot. The aging European population is also disastrous for the economy, as if this were not bad enough. With a 1.53 fertility rate, the new generations in Europe are getting smaller and smaller. Inevitably, the labor market will suffer from these 25 years from now. The labor market could become extremely competitive as fewer Europeans seek employment. When companies cannot find competent workers, they relocate. The smaller labor market could then result in a sluggish economy accompanied by extremely low fertility rates. This is now a very plausible scenario in Europe. Some European nations have already found an answer to this immigration problem. But first, I would like to discuss why this is occurring in Europe and nowhere else. To be fair, Europe is not the only continent with a demographic problem. Contrarily, most developed nations are experiencing problems with aging, but Europe is the first to feel its severe effects. They are descending. In the past 70 years, global fertility rates have decreased by 50%, but Europe has the lowest fertility rates of all continents. There are, obviously, exceptions to this rule. China, Japan, and South Korea all have very low fertility rates too. But what is the root cause of this precipitous decline in fertility rates? We will use examples from the Congo and Italy. In a variety of ways, including fertility rates, the two are notably dissimilar. According to the World Bank, the fertility rate in Congo is 6.2% and in Italy it is 1.2%. The population of Congo is significantly larger than that of Italy. There are numerous causes for this, including religion, culture, the employment status of women, and infertility. But the biggest factor may be this: how developed a country is. Most people in Congo are farmers. Kids can help their parents out on the farm, so it simply makes sense for them to have a lot of children. And when these farmers get old, they need to have a lot of kids to take care of them. The government of Congo will not assist them with pensions, so having children in Italy is mandatory. However, the majority of people work in the service sector. When you're working at a bank or a school. In Italy, there are few economic incentives to have children. Having many children will consume a great deal of time and money, and you do not need to do so. Ultimately, the Italian government handles pensions upon retirement. Therefore, having children is necessary in the Congo, but not in Italy. In general, developed countries have lower fertility rates than underdeveloped ones. In the past 70 years, the world has undergone significant development, which is the primary reason for the 50% decline in global fertility rates. people have fewer reasons to procreate on a global scale. In this trend, Europe is just ahead of other continents. Europe and North America have been the most developed continents in the world for decades, and with extensive social security programs provided by governments, there is even less of a need to have children in Europe. With state-provided pensions, healthcare, and unemployment benefits, you do not need children to qualify for Social Security. This is why Europe is the leader in the decline of the fertility rate, but other regions may soon catch up. We have already discussed the problems that low fertility rates can cause for a nation. It leads to a population that is aging, which could harm Europe's economy and threaten systems such as healthcare and retirement. In the foreseeable future, Europe will have only 2 people under 65 for every person over 65. Europe must quickly find a solution to the aging of their population to prevent the massive demographic problems from escalating uncontrollably. Ironically, the most straightforward solution is to have more children. As Europe developed, Europeans believed that having a large family was no longer necessary. In any case, the government would provide them with pensions and healthcare, correct? Now, however, the entire system is in danger of collapsing. Precisely because Europe doesn't have enough children to prevent this from happening, Europe needs to increase its fertility rate from an unstable 1.53 to a stable 2.1, but this is easier said than done. How will you initially encourage individuals to have more children? As Europe developed, numerous nations implemented child allowances. European governments essentially pay their citizens to have children through family benefits. In Germany, for instance, parents can receive up to €250 per month for childcare. Governments hope to boost their fertility rates through such financial incentives. In 2019, European Union countries spent €315 billion on family benefits, a 43% increase since 2000, according to Eurostat data. However, despite the financial incentive, the programs have not been particularly effective, at least when fertility rates are considered. Child allowances have been around for a while now, but fertility rates haven't improved at all. People in Europe are still not sufficiently motivated to have more children, and even if European governments discover the secret formula to increase fertility rates to 2.1, it may be too late. Fertility rates below this replacement level of 2.1 have a delayed impact when fewer babies are born. Now, it will only affect the labor market 20 years from now. The number of 20-year-olds in 2043 is already pretty much set in stone. If Europe is already experiencing problems, there is nothing it can do in the near future to resolve them. Europe has one more card up its sleeve, and that card is immigration. In 2021 alone, Europe took in around 2.3 million immigrants. In 2022, these immigrants were significantly younger than the average European, who was 30 years old on average. 5.3% of European Union residents were foreign-born. Europe desires young immigrants to fill labor market voids. In France, the pension system is struggling due to the country's aging population. 10% of the population was born in a foreign country, and that figure of 10% excludes the children of those immigrants who were born in France. The majority of these immigrants are from Africa, where fertility rates are significantly higher than in France. It does not take much to convince immigrants to enter the country. The majority of the time, immigrants have significantly more opportunities in France than in their home country. France has a superior education system and higher-paying jobs than the majority of African nations. Therefore, this is a win-win scenario, correct? France gains the young workers it needs for its labor market, while immigrants gain a brighter future. But each solution has advantages and disadvantages. Not all French citizens and Europeans are pleased with mass immigration. Some more conservative political parties are concerned about the negative effects of a large foreign population. They fear that it threatens their country's traditional culture, increases crime rates, and deprives young Europeans of economic opportunities. Okay, I won't delve too deeply into European immigration policies, but it's important to note that immigration is a contentious issue in European nations. Some political parties view immigration as a solution to the problem of aging, while others believe the negative effects of immigration far outweigh the positive ones. Due to this glaring divide, immigration may not always be the answer when fertility rates remain as low as they are now. European countries would have to keep inviting millions of new people into their borders. Numerous Europeans have supported this concept for years, making it difficult for governments to gain political support for it. Immigration is still a good short-term solution to Europe's aging problem, but in the long term, Europe has to fix the underlying problem, their fertility rate. Unfortunately, I do not have a quick fix for this problem, but Europe must figure it out quickly. Otherwise, the French protests could grow into something much larger. Thank you for watching this video and for tuning into the Financial Fortune channel. We hope you found the insights shared helpful in understanding the current state of Europe's economy and the potential impact on investors. Remember, it's important to stay informed and take proactive steps to protect your financial well-being, especially during times of economic uncertainty. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to stay updated with the latest news and insights on finance and investing. Until next time, this is the Financial Fortune channel, signing off.